work with Native women to, give us some information about holiday stress, even though I know that each of us has our own individual experience of it. I know as a collective, like it's just such a busy season for all of us. And I feel like it's important to acknowledge that and also to give ourselves grace, but more importantly, to connect and to learn some new ways to cope, right? I mean, that's why we're here. So again, super excited to see you all here. Yes, welcome everybody. Like I said, excited to be here with you all tonight. Um, I saw somebody share this on LinkedIn and they said, wow, what a novel idea, like thriving through the holidays, right? So I'm hoping that at the end of this, that you come away with some actionable things that you can implement in your personal wellness journey, as well as learn a little bit more about each other. As Jen mentioned, for those of you who are still coming in, please put your business information in the chat. We'd love to visit all of your sites, support you however we can, and there will be time at the end for Q&A. So really just grateful to be here. And as Jen mentioned, this is kind of my wheelhouse, like health and wellness is really all that I do these days. It started with myself, and now we have a small team. We work here in Arizona. And again, my goal is to one, do some education and awareness building, because I feel like when we have a way to describe what we're experiencing, it helps destigmatize that experience. And we realize that we're not the only ones going through that, because a lot of times when there's stress or when we're feeling overwhelmed, we think I must be the only one. And as small business owners, and even as large business owners, that can be a challenge because very few of us have insight into how other people are feeling and doing during the holiday season. So this is really a space for us to explore that a little bit more. I'm definitely going to have some tips and tricks, teach you a couple of coping skills, and then questions at the end. So again, my name is Jordanna. I was born and raised on the Navajo Reservation in New Mexico. My parents were, what's the right word? They really wanted us to be successful in Western European settings. So I grew up in a bilingual home. I did manage to learn, I would say, a considerable amount of Navajo, but not as much as I would have liked. But something that we did stick to growing up on the reservation was this sense of like really honoring seasons and understanding that there was a time and place for everything. Living out here off the reservation, there really isn't that seasonal awareness of what every season comes with and what the goals and what the needs are for that particular time of year. So I thought I would just share a little bit about like my culture and its significance to, the season that we're in now. So for us, winter has, it's a time for reflection. It's a time for storytelling. It's a time for preparation. Um, and really, when I think back on those early experiences, there was a lot of connection. And so I think, going through COVID, one of the things that really got disrupted for us was that sense of connection, moving from working in person to maybe working virtually. It sort of changed. And so I just kind of want to call attention to that, but also call attention to the fact that we do have this virtual space that allows us that connectivity. Um, as Indigenous women, we have some unique stressors that other people may or may not have. Family obligations, we may have responsibilities. I'm a kinship auntie, so I have additional responsibilities to my nephew who doesn't have his parents anymore. My parents are raising him now, but it's like I have extra responsibilities for him and for my parents because they are older. which also fits into cultural obligations. We may have obligations that come from our families of origin, from our community, and then there may be community responsibilities. So responsibilities not only from our own internal community, but the greater community. And so for me, that sometimes looks like the counseling field in general, you know, being a small business owner and the responsibilities that come with that. Um, and then the other piece of it that we have to call attention to is the increased financial pressure, right? Everything's more expensive. Um, Plus, holiday events and things like that, that can definitely increase our stress. Um, and we also know that, we're not the only ones experiencing this. This is something that everybody here in the United States and probably globally, I would say, they experience a lot more stress this time of year. So there's a little handy statistic there about that. And as I mentioned earlier, that increased expectation, we may be kind of pulled between multiple priorities, so to speak. We might have to try to figure out how we can prioritize obligations, but this may also lead to us feeling overextended at times. Um, so balancing those roles does create additional stress for us, as well as, like I mentioned earlier, the financial pressures, gift giving. There's a lot of commercializing around what does it mean to get a gift. When I was growing up, it was like my grandma would get me, I liked Christmas because I'd get a new pair of socks, but really Christmas was about connection and spending time with family. But it wasn't so much about, like tech and gear and getting the right things, versus like my teenager who now is like, I need the latest, greatest XYZ. And I'm like, what about your old one? Does your old one still work? And then I'm like, well, I don't think he would appreciate getting a pair of socks for Christmas as much as I did growing up. So, balancing those expectations, right, and juggling what we have now versus what might have been there in the past. And the other big thing is, as business owners, the knowledge that our cash flow might slow down, creating that sense of economic uncertainty. I know in my business, it's kind of feast or famine around the holidays. We get those last minute people who are like, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to be with my family for a week. I need therapy now. And then we get other people who are like, I don't need therapy now because I'm going to go spend time with my family. So, it just kind of comes, it's hit or miss. And I just kind of plan that December and January are going to be slow cash flow months for us because we know that there's a lot going on, but also that we might have a lot more emergent or urgent appointments that don't necessarily stay consistent throughout the year, if that makes sense. The other piece, since I'm a trauma therapist, that's really important to talk about is historical trauma, right? Sometimes the holidays can bring, things resurfacing, and that can also be stressful for us, taxing our resilience. And then the other piece is just that, the isolation at times where our own cultural values and experiences are not represented in the larger society, or that we may not be adequately compensated. I know on the Futures Indigenous Women, one of the things that they have on their website is that Indigenous women are often compensated at 60 cents to the dollar versus like a white male. So, the expectations are still there, the needs are still there, the priorities are still there, but we may not have a lot of the economic resources that we need and that we deserve. So bringing that awareness out is important. Um, and then I'm going to stop talking for a few minutes because I'm going to show you a short video about how stress impacts your body. Because again, I believe that education is powerful. And then the rest of our time, we're going to spend on tips. And then, like I said, I'm going to teach you a couple of coping skills that you can use anywhere, and they're free. So let's go ahead and start the video and go from there.
Cramming for a test? Trying to get more done than you have time to do? Stress is a feeling we all experience when we are challenged or overwhelmed. But more than just an emotion, stress is a hardwired physical response that travels throughout your entire body. In the short term, stress can be advantageous, but when activated too often or too long, your primitive fight or flight stress response not only changes your brain, but also damages many of the other organs and cells throughout your body. Your adrenal gland releases the stress hormones cortisol, epinephrine, also known as adrenaline, and norepinephrine. As these hormones travel through your bloodstream, they easily reach your blood vessels and heart. Adrenaline causes your heart to beat faster and raises your blood pressure, over time causing hypertension. Cortisol can also cause the endothelium, or inner lining of blood vessels, to not function normally. Scientists now know that this is an early step in triggering the process of atherosclerosis, or cholesterol plaque buildup in your arteries. Together, these changes increase your chances of a heart attack or stroke. When your brain senses stress, it activates your autonomic nervous system. Through this network of nerve connections, your big brain communicates stress to your enteric or intestinal nervous system. Besides causing butterflies in your stomach, this brain-gut connection can disturb the natural rhythmic contractions that move food through your gut, leading to irritable bowel syndrome, and can increase your gut's sensitivity to acid, making you more likely to feel heartburn. Via the gut's nervous system, stress can also change the composition and function of your gut bacteria, which may affect your digestive and overall health. Speaking of digestion, does chronic stress affect your waistline? Well, yes. Cortisol can increase your appetite. It tells your body to replenish your energy stores with energy-dense foods and carbs, causing you to crave comfort foods. High levels of cortisol can also cause you to put on those extra calories as visceral or deep belly fat. This type of fat doesn't just make it harder to button your pants. It is an organ that actively releases hormones and immune system chemicals called cytokines that can increase your risk of developing chronic diseases, such as heart disease and insulin resistance. Meanwhile, stress hormones affect immune cells in a variety of ways. Initially, they help prepare to fight invaders and heal after injury, but chronic stress can dampen the function of some immune cells, make you more susceptible to infections, and slow the rate you heal. Want to live a long life? You may have to curb your chronic stress. That's because it has even been associated with shortened telomeres, the shoelace tip ends of chromosomes that measure a cell's age. Telomeres cap chromosomes to allow DNA to get copied every time a cell divides without damaging the cell's genetic code. And they shorten with each cell division. When telomeres become too short, a cell can no longer divide, and it dies. As if all that weren't enough, chronic stress has even more ways it can sabotage your health, including acne, hair loss, sexual dysfunction, headaches, muscle tension, difficulty concentrating, fatigue, and irritability. So, what does all this mean for you? Your life will always be filled with stressful situations, but what matters to your brain and entire body is how you respond to that stress. If you can view those situations as challenges you can control and master, rather than as threats that are insurmountable, you will perform better in the short run and stay healthy in the long run.
All right. So that leads us to our first self-care tip. But really, what I wanted you to see in that video is just, the actual biology of what happens when stress enters your system. There are actual physical negative ramifications of unchecked stress. So it's really important for us if we know that we're going to enter stressful environments, experiences, seasons, situations that we, have some kind of a plan and we do things to kind of mitigate that because stress over time, it just builds. It's like a brick wall. Every experience, every stressful situation, it just builds and builds and builds. And we have to actively do things to try to reduce that so that we don't have those health concerns that, could come up if we're not mitigating the stress. So, the first self-care activity that we're going to do is it's called progressive muscle relaxation. So this is one of my favorites. It's one that I teach the majority of my patients, and I also have taught interns. I've taught this in community settings. And so what I want you to do right now is just, get comfortable, get in a comfortable position. If you have your phone, you can put your phone down, just make sure you can hear me. Sit in a comfortable position. Most of you have your cameras off, so I'm not going to be able to see what you're doing, which is perfect, right? So we're going to practice this together. And what we're essentially going to do is we're going to tense and relax different parts of our body. Um, this is a stress reduction technique. So we're going to systematically tense and relax muscle groups. It's really good for reducing physical tension, stress, anxiety. Plus, it's free and you can use it anytime, anywhere. And you don't have to tell people you're doing it. I mean, you don't have to like stick your arms up or anything. You can just be like tensing and relaxing certain body parts to kind of give yourself that sensation of the tension and the release. A little bit about the science behind it. Your body cannot be both tensed and relaxed. It can only do one. So if you're feeling tension and you deliberately try to relax your body, it's harder for that tension to bounce right back, especially if you're kind of battling it with the relaxation. Um, this is a little clip of the handout. You all are going to get the handout so that you can practice as you're going forward. And so what I'm going to do is just kind of walk you through it. And like I said, so get yourself in a cozy position. And we're going to start down at your feet. So what I want you to do is curl up those toes and hold it. So you're just going to hold that for a moment. Just keep hanging on, hanging on. And if you have any physical, areas, maybe like if you have injuries or anything where you can't do it, don't do it in that area, but you can definitely practice in an area that feels fine. Go ahead and let that go if you haven't already. And just notice what that feels like. Now we're going to move up a little bit higher. So we're going to tense our legs. We're going to tense our calves and our hamstrings. And we're just going to hold that there for a moment. You can add a deep breath if that's helpful. Go ahead and let that go. Now we're going to work on that little belly area. We're going to hold that. So just suck it in really good. Go ahead and let it go. Now we're going to move up into our arms. So, go ahead and squeeze those arms together. And if you want, you can squeeze the hands too. Just tense them nice and tight, nice and tight, nice and tight. Just take a breath and let it go. And then we're just going to kind of roll our shoulders out a little bit and just notice what that feels like. So that was just like a brief overview of that. I mean, obviously you can practice that, for longer durations than what we did, but really I just wanted to kind of get you familiar with that. What I often will tell people to do is a lot of people get stressed out in traffic. So I'll tell them to practice this when they're at a stoplight and they can like tense and release their hands on the steering wheel. Now, make sure your car doesn't move. So if you put it in park or if you put it in neutral, pull that parking brake so that when you're tensing and releasing those hands and doing some deep breathing, it will help with that relaxation. So let me know how that landed. Maybe pop some responses into the chat. Like I said, it was just a really quick exposure, But the idea is the more you do it, the more you practice, the easier it is for you to do when you need it. And this is also something that you can do in preparation, like I said, for stressful situations. If you're getting ready to go into a meeting or you just finished a meeting that was maybe challenging, airports, getting ready to do parent pickup, just these common things that we experience in our daily lives, whether you're sitting at a booth, you can also do that if you're sitting, you can do it where you're laying down. Um, and then if you have kiddos, this is a really great one to teach them, especially if they have difficulty relaxing, getting ready to go to sleep. You can do it with them. And there actually are also guided meditations that will walk you through this. And there's some even on YouTube. And I'm sure there's audio ones now that you can find if you just look for progressive muscle relaxation. Um, it'll show you those things. And then, if you have more questions about it, you can always reach out to me too, and I can give you more resources. So that was our first skill. Um, the other thing to talk about is it's really important to set clear limits right now. As we mentioned, there's only one of us. We can't do everything. Sometimes I think we, as business owners, feel like we have to do everything and we have to do everything now. And really, the reality of it is that we can't. There's no way for all of us to do that. So making sure that you're setting those limits. Some things that you can do that I love is using digital tools. So there's a lot of ways that you can automate different tasks for your business, whether that's using a calendar, um, using something like Calendly for scheduling. You can create to-do lists. You can also create tasks lists for people using Notion. Um, I'm a huge fan of like free lists too. So like Google Keep, Apple Lists, those are also great ways that you can kind of load some of those things. And the way that I also do it is try to visualize that putting those things to rest until it's time to work on them. Um, and speaking of rest, it's also important to plan your rest hours because if you don't plan rest hours, they're typically not going to happen. So giving yourself more breaks, especially if you're feeling like there's a lot going on, you want to make sure you build that into your schedule because what's going to happen is if you don't build it in, it's not going to happen. The other piece of it is protecting that time. So, usually what happens is we give that time away first, when really what we should do is give away that time last. That is your most precious, important time. Whether it's giving yourself some downtime in the middle or toward the end of your workday, that's going to be really helpful because it's going to give you some time to integrate some of the things that you're working on. This is another great tool that I love. It's called the Eisenhower Decision Matrix. You can find worksheets and templates for this online, so you can print them. I'm sure there's digital ones. But what it is it's a grid to really help you make decisions. So if you're someone that, struggles with like, okay, well, I have 43 things to do. How do I decide what I need to do right now, today, or for the next 4 hours? This decision matrix is awesome. So basically the way that it works is you're going to jot down your to-do lists and then you're going to categorize them. The first few times you do this, it's probably not going to be intuitive. It's going to be a little bit confusing. It might feel clunky, but the more you use it, the easier it is for you to make these decisions. So the priority is going to be what's important and what's urgent. So if there's an intersection of a task that falls in there, then it's going to tell you to do it now. So for example, for me, I knew at 5:45, I needed to log in for this webinar. 5:45 was not the time to go take a nap, eat a cookie, do all of those things, right? It was urgent and it was important because I knew I was going to co-facilitate this webinar. Now, if it's urgent but not important, whoops, then you want to look at whether you can delegate it. Is there someone else that can do that task for you? Now, if you're a solo entrepreneur, that might be a family member, a friend, someone else that you might ask to help you, maybe bringing in temporary help, or training somebody to do something that is urgent but is not as important, you know. So picking a task like that. Um, on the top left, we have important but not urgent. So that's something that you would schedule for later. So something that's important and not urgent, it needs to get done, but it doesn't need to be done this exact minute, doesn't need to be done today or this hour. And what's interesting is over time, when you're working through using this decision matrix, what you're going to find is some of these items that seemed important initially might fall down here on the bottom and they become less important. Maybe you were going to do something and you pushed it out a few days, and then you reevaluated and said, no, I'm actually not going to do that. I'm going to do this other thing. So now you can delete it or eliminate it. Because a lot of times we have things maybe that are on our list that are not as important as we think they might be. So that's the decision matrix. And like I said, once you get to where you practice using it, you can kind of automate some pieces of it and it'll help you make decisions, especially if you're at a stuck point and trying to navigate between which of these things do I do right now. Okay. Other tools and insights. I mentioned earlier about the financial pressures, how we can have increased strain. Again, the planning piece is really important. Going back to the cultural piece. So, in winters, that was something that we would think about. We would think about planning. We would think about what are we going to be doing in the spring? And Indigenous peoples have had that in our systems. Almost every culture that, at least that I've been exposed to, there's a planning component. There's a planning for, you're not going to harvest unless you plan. You need to till the ground. You need to select your seeds. You need to get family involvement. So there's a planning in there. And so we have to bring that also into our business and into our personal lives. Like, how do we plan for the things that are coming up? Working with a financial planner could be helpful, whether it's personal or business expenses. It's never too late to start. It's, oh, today is the best day, you know, rather than saying, oh, I should have done this X amount of time ago. You know, Starting now is always the best. Um, you can connect to Indigenous informed and led financial resources for guidance. I just saw the misspelling. Goudain support and funding. Some examples, like one of my favorites is Hills Parker and Associates. I don't know if she's taking clients right now, but Amber is amazing, and understands Indigenous values. And I know there are other Indigenous-led accounting services and support services that will help you with budgeting, with planning, with understanding your books and understanding how that also impacts your personal finances. I also wanted to give a plug for the Rooted Relative Fund. I know there's a lot of business owners here. Learn more about that. The Rooted Relative Fund is a initiative that Roan Horse Consulting and RCAC, along with some Indigenous folks, myself, and a few other folks, were able to help, I would say, inform the fund. And it's an Indigenous friendly lending opportunity. So if anybody else needs more information, I'm happy to share. And I'm sure there's at least one or two people on the call today that know a lot more about it. But it's important to understand where you are, where you're going, and what you need. The other piece of it is prioritizing your mental and physical health. All of you that are here have demonstrated that, right? You're making that a priority. Other examples, smudging, being outside, connecting, and then joining groups. I mean, there's a lot to be done when you have that collective cohesion. And then again, making sure that you're scheduling those breaks and then scheduling time for absorption. So as you're learning new things, giving yourself time to process I think that's something that Western culture doesn't really value as much, and we, I think, tend to absorb that, and really going back to sort of our traditional ways of, like, learning and knowing. It takes time to absorb, it takes time to integrate things, so making sure that we give ourselves that time. Um, and then again, just a little digestible, that stress prevention, management, and that whole body regulation is really connecting to our wholeness. Indigenous peoples have always known that our heads and our bodies are connected, they're not separated. It's all part of one system. And so I think just having that awareness and, really being firm in that. Um, this presentation would be useless without boundaries, right? Saying no, recognizing your personal limits. Like I said earlier, it's always easy to give up our time. It's easy to give up the time that we need to do our best, but really just realizing that and saying, there's only one me, and using those tools and resources, that self-reflection, whether it's taking a tea break, whether it's journaling, whether it's reaching out to a friend. But I think that's important too, is to say it and then to understand why it's there and how it helps. So we are moving into our second skill. And then after this, I believe we're going to have a good chunk of time for Q&A. But again, I want you guys to get a little bit cozy. So this technique is called light stream. So this is actually this comes from my training as an EMDR therapist. One of the things that we do in EMDR therapy is we always make sure people are, the term that we use is resourced, which means people have to have basic essential grounding and stability before we deal with trauma, right? Which just makes sense. Like we have to have a way to reconnect and to shift from something that's stressful to getting into a neutral stance. So a light stream technique is one of these things. It has some imagery and some things, that come into it. But we're gonna try it today together, and I just wanted to give you this skill. It's also really good for people who have physical pain. So for those of you who have physical pain, whether it's a back injury or an old basketball injury, or maybe a current basketball injury, or maybe you're like me and you sit all day and you're just at the end of the day like, okay, what do I do? This is really good. So what I want you to do is just think about how you're feeling right now, and just kind of check in with yourself. Notice what emotions you're feeling in your body, and just kind of build some awareness for that. So just take a moment, notice what that looks like, what that feels like. And I'm just going to kind of walk you through the light stream. You also will get a copy of the PowerPoint so that you're able to look through this. And if you guys need this typed or anything, I'm happy to dump it into a Word doc for you. So now what I want you to do is notice those feelings that we mentioned. And just imagine that those feelings are an object. So this is really helpful when you're having, like I said, negative feelings, distressed feelings. I mean, all of us have a lot of stress. So it might be helpful to imagine that. Like, where is that stress that you're holding on to? Where does it show up in your body? And imagine that it's an object in your body. So take the first thing that comes to mind after recognizing the emotions and pay attention to that location. Now that you've, labeled that, ask yourself these questions about the object. If it had a shape, what would that shape be? If it had a size, what size would it be? If it had a color, what color would it be? If it had a temperature, what temperature would it be? Hot or cold? If it had a texture, what texture would it be? If it had a sound, what kind of sound would it make? Would it be a high pitch or low pitch? And now you're going to do a direct imagery exercise. Pick a color that you most associate with healing. Imagine there's a stream of light in this color that is coming from the center of the universe. This is a magic light because the more you need of it, the more of it is available to you. Allow this light to flow into your head and focus it down on the object. Let the light vibrate and resonate like a laser beam in and around the object. Allow yourself to just notice what happens to the object. Remember that the more light or energy you need, the more is available to you. Allow yourself to feel the light into your mind and allow the healing light to vibrate and resonate in and around the object, and notice what happens to the object. When you notice the object is gone or feels that is contained, allow yourself to let the energy from the light flow into your body. Allow it to reach the tips of your finger and the tips of your toes. Allow yourself to be engulfed and overwhelmed by the energy. Count to 3 and open your eyes. So, if you followed along with me, hopefully you'll notice that what you were feeling, if it was distressful, if it was stress, that it's reduced or gone, or just having a positive sensation and experience. So, that concludes our little journey. And now I wanted to open it up and see if you had questions, feedback, um, you know, what was that like for you all?
We have Jordanna sharing that was amazing. Gina shares that she's feeling good and sharing words of gratitude. Tina has a question. How long is a typical session?
Oh, a typical session of like light stream or oh yeah, yeah. So definitely it depends on you and what you're working on. So if you felt like you needed more light, you can go back and do the exercise and do it longer. Does that make sense? Because the idea is like you want to keep bringing the light in until either it's gone or it's contained. Because the thing about it is like stress and distress, we can contain it. We're not always going to be able to get rid of it, but we can contain it. And we also can contain it so that we can add more skills or more resources to reduce the size of it. And the more you work on it, the more it's going to reduce over time because your resilience is going to increase. So it's like a muscle, right? Like that, the muscle and the practice, it's like who's ever gone out for a sport and then didn't train, right? You're really sore. You're like, that was hard. That was hard. And then after a few weeks, you're like, oh, that wasn't so bad. And then you get better at it and better at it. And it's the same way with like stress reduction skills, self-care, They are skills and they're things that you have to practice. And we forget about them. It's always the first thing to go. It's the first thing that we get rid of because as moms, as business owners, as epic multitaskers, we're always doing a lot of things. And so taking that time for yourself is really going to be important. And then I just wanted to say the reasons I picked these ones are, like I said, these are ones that you can do anywhere and they're free, right? You don't have to have anything, you don't have to have any fancy gadgets. It's just practicing using the skills so that you can keep doing them. Yes, Kim, we always forget our well-being. Yeah, because again, we're also taught to be selfless in our communities, right? But we can't take care of other people until we take care of ourselves. What support do you provide to Indigenous entrepreneurs? Oh, that is a great question, Amber. So, for those of you who enjoyed this, I am in 2025, I will be providing more support to Indigenous entrepreneurs. I will be doing some, I would say, like intensives, where we'll be focusing more on Indigenous business development as well as health and wellness. So please, if you're interested in anything more, I've got my QR code coming up. And you can follow me and my business on social media, and I'll be sharing more about that and how you can sign up for any of those opportunities that are available because I feel like it's kind of the missing link, like the better we are, the better we can be as business owners, as moms, as partners, as even a friend to ourselves. And we have to do that in order to thrive, right? And we all have it within us. Yes, thank you. Yes, absolutely. Burnout is so real. And like I said, we think that we're in it alone and we're the only ones going through it, but our culture is designed to create, not our culture, not Indigenous culture, but American culture is designed to, it's like a burn 'em and turn 'em mentality. Oh, yeah, April, go ahead. I see your hand up.
Thank you, Jordanna, for taking us through those two exercises. As I'm sitting here, it reminds me just again how powerful my mind is. Whatever I'm focusing on, that's what's gonna grow. So if I was before we started this session, I felt torn because I literally have three places to be, and one of them is with my daughter. And so I was just, thinking about what you were saying about what is that feeling, and I think another important thing with I think I was watching Brene Brown or whatever on one of the streaming channels, and she did some survey about like typical Americans, like how many emotions that on average Americans can identify, and I think it was something like 4 or 7 emotions. And I'm just gonna guess, but it was like definitely over 100 different emotions that are available. So like even when we talk about what we're feeling, if we're limited to just like four feelings that we can identify, maybe we're even self-diagnosing incorrectly, right? Because if we do ask for help, maybe we're not even using the right term or identifying our feelings correctly. So um, I just think it's really powerful to know, like, with that exercise you did, my neck totally felt at least in that, and I did get a massage and I did get a chiropractor adjustment, and I feel like, but this was like the part that Calgon, my muscles just away. Your tip took me away. So I so I appreciate that, because another thing that I have awareness of is that if I'm not good, my business isn't good, and everyone who's dependent on me and or my business, it affects them as well. And so, like, self-care is not selfish
No.
because I'm the foundation. So thank you.
Yay. Awesome. Yes. Yeah. I I definitely agree. I mean, there is, I love the work of Brene Brown, and she talks a lot about vulnerability, and she talks about like rumbling, right? Rumbling with things that are happening. And also, how do we manage, how do we cope through those things? Like you said, like you are the center, and if you want to thrive, there is that direct correlation between how well we're doing and how well our business is doing. When you're and then the other piece of it too is when the business is not doing so great, sometimes we can internalize that and not really understand the full picture of the landscape of what we're dealing with. And I think that's really important to understand, is that there's so much more happening. And I think when we're siloed, we don't have those conversations with other women, with other Indigenous women, with other people who are really creating these huge amounts of change for our economies, for our communities, as well as being role models and all the other million hats that we wear. Um, you know, yeah. So great, you're welcome. So I love the comments. Thank you guys so much. And let's see, understanding. Sometimes I feel like my team doesn't support me in this. I think maybe, Tina, I would give them homework. I would show them the video, like what stress does to your body, and let them know, like, if you're not well, you're like the creator of their jobs, you know? How are they going to thrive and function if you're not well, And I think that that team culture is something that's hard, but also normalizing that you need to take breaks, I think is important. And also encouraging them to take breaks, like that reciprocity, which has to be built into the culture. So it sounds like, I'd be happy to chat through or work through some of that with you. But yeah, I feel like, making that transition is hard, but unless it's not going to change unless you change it, you know? And it's definitely something that has to be built into your system and your scheduling. And Shaye, I did see that you scheduled yourself rest. I'm so glad. Um, but yeah, I know I missed some comments. Thank you guys again. And I'm gonna go to my next slide, which has our QR code there. Um, like I said, we're on socials. You can sign up for our updates. There also is a BIPOC wellness workbook that I created that is on our page that you can download for free. So it's definitely good stuff there for you. And then I know we have about 5 minutes. Thank you guys so much. It's been a pleasure. And like I said, you'll get the resources. And if there's other things that you need, let me know. And then I will take some time after this too and like check out all the comments, check out all your businesses, and follow you guys. So thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jordanna. If everyone can join me in some words of gratitude in the chat before we part ways tonight. Just thank you so much, Jordanna, for sharing all the tools, the muscle tension exercise, the light exercise, and then also like some wellness for our schedules and for our businesses, like the notes, the to-do lists, right? And being able to use the matrix to maybe delegate some other tasks to some folks on our team. So thank you again for sharing those. And I also welcome you all to share any of your resources. If you all have any um, uh, knowledge of cool apps and things out there, please feel free to share and drop it in the chat. And don't forget to reach out to Jordanna if you have any more questions or if you'd like to get connected. In the presentation, the last slide, you'll see that QR code as well as her website information. Thank you all so much for joining us tonight, and I hope you have a great rest of your evening. Happy holidays, happy winter solstice. Wish you all blessings, rest, and look forward to seeing you all beginning early 2025. And don't forget to reach out to me if you have any questions as well. My name is Jennifer. My email address is jennifer@nativewomenlead.org. Hutgam, have a good night. And thank you again, Jordanna. I appreciate you so much.
Happy holidays, Jordanna. Thank you for everything. Yeah.
Yay!
It's
Yes,
always
happy
good to see your
holidays.
face.
Yeah,
You look healthy. You
Thank
look
you.
Jordana,
healthier. Yeah.
Thank
Jordana,
you.
I've been researching you. Thank you so much for everything that you've been doing for our community. And it's
Yeah.
amazing the work that you have been providing for Native women. And I just want to let you know that a lot of us are looking up to you through the next year, and may you be blessed and mentored and guided by the Creator in every way. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
Well, have a great holiday. And
Yes.
yeah, thank you for everything.
Yes, thank you. I'm glad you were able to come, and thank you
Yeah.
so much.
Yeah. One of the like other techniques that I learned years ago in college was especially when my mind is racing, I'll start telling my body parts,
Mhm.
you are feeling warm, heavy, and tired. And then you start with your feet, and you just slowly move up to your body, and then by the time you get to your shoulders, I'm usually out cold. And then that kind of helps me relax and get my mind, because in my mind, especially at night when you're laid down and your lists are still going in your head, um,
Yeah.
that's one thing. If I can't get my mind to relax, that's one thing I use is telling my body parts they're feeling warm, heavy, and tired. Um, but I'm gonna try this tension, um, and in addition to see how that works, because I hadn't heard of this one. So yeah,
Yeah.
so I'm glad to add it to my repertoire of relaxation, in addition to my scheduled nap time or rest time.
Yes. And I can't wait to hear how it goes. I mean, it has to be done, you know?
Yeah, yep, it sure does. Yep.
Yep.
While you rest up, again, you're looking healthy, you're looking
Thank
good.
you.
So yeah,
Thank you.
yep.
Sounds good. This was great. Thank you so much for having me and for co-hosting and everything. And yeah, just happy to be here, happy to share, and definitely would love to do more.